Elections polls are everywhere.
Klein is here with our latest poll with Ipsos. It is as close as ever.
The polls underestimate Donald Trump.
If the results match the polling averages, guess what? Neither candidate gets to 270 electoral votes.
It's called the poll of record, and it's the final poll of the election for pollsters.
Not only on TV, even on social media, people are obsessed with these numbers. So naturally, that begs the questions. How actually accurate are election polls? And does having a high percentage of support actually mean a candidate will win? I think the best place to start answering these questions is to look at two events in the past: the US 2016 presidential elections and the 2019 UK general election. In 2016, US presidential election polls leading up to the election showed Hillary Clinton as the likely winner over Donald Trump. National polls had Clinton ahead by around 3 to 4%, which was mostly accurate in the national popular vote. Clinton did win by about 2%. However, the key error was in state-level polling, especially in swing states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, where Trump won by very slim margins, giving him the Electoral College win. A more obvious example that displays how polls fall short will be the 2019 UK general election. Polls initially suggested a close race between Boris Johnson's Conservative Party and Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. However, the Conservatives ended up winning by a landslide, securing a significant majority in Parliament. Pollsters misjudged the popularity of Johnson's pro-Brexit stance among voters in former Labour stronghold. And also, Conservative supporters were less likely to reveal their voting intentions to pollsters, effect known as shy Tory effect. Now, these aren't just two cases that polls just got it wrong. There are so many other examples, but the point of this video isn't to go through all of them, but to answer the question, if this is the case with polls, why are we still doing them and why people are so obsessed about them? But first, we have to understand how polls even work. Polls start by picking a small group of people to represent a much larger population. This group is called a sample, and it's usually a few hundred to a few thousand people. Imagine picking a few spoonfuls of soup to taste rather than drinking the whole pot. The idea is that if the sample is chosen well, it will reflect the broader population. And this process is called sampling. Random selection is really important to avoid bias. Pollsters aim for a random sample, meaning they try to give everyone an equal chance of being selected. They might call people from random phone numbers, email lists, or even approach people in public. The goal is to get a group that looks like the entire voting population in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, and other factors. Once they collect responses, pollsters adjust the sample to better match the actual population. For example, if they end up with more responses from young people but fewer from older adults, they'll weight the results to better represent each age group's share of the overall population. Wait, what the heck does that mean? Suppose you need 10 pieces of fruit in your salad, and it should be 50% apples, 5 apples, 30% oranges, 3 oranges, and 20% grapes, 2 grapes. But you accidentally end up with 7 apples, 2 oranges, and 1 grape. Now, instead of throwing out fruit, you can adjust how much each fruit counts. In this case, to balance things out, you could make each apple count as 0.71 of an apple, 5/7. So 7 apples will equal the 5 apples you needed. Make each orange count as 1.5 oranges, 3/2. So 2 oranges will equal 3. Make each grape count as 2 grapes, 2/1. So 1 grape will represent 2 grapes. By adjusting how much each fruit counts, the salad ends up representing the balance you originally wanted: 50% apples, 30% oranges, and 20% grapes, without actually changing the pieces of fruit you collected. This is called weighting. And in a poll, if too many young people respond, each young person's response might be weighted down a bit, and older people's responses might be weighted up, so that the results reflect the population's true balance. Now, polls are never 100% accurate, so each poll comes with a margin of error, a range that shows how much the results might differ if they polled the entire population. If a poll says a candidate has 52% support with a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. That means the true support is likely somewhere between 49% and 55%. But accuracy doesn't just depend on numbers, it also depends on how questions are asked. Pollsters carefully design their questions to avoid influencing people's answers, using neutral, straightforward language to get honest responses. Even with all these sophisticated strategies, polls can still go wrong, and often for reasons that aren't obvious at first. One major issue is sampling bias. If certain groups, like younger or lower income voters, are underrepresented in the sample, the results can end up skewed no matter how big the sample is. Another problem is non-response bias, which happens when certain people, maybe those who are busy or mistrustful of pollsters, simply don't respond, leaving gaps in the data. Then there's the influence of question wording and order. Even small changes in phrasing or the order in which questions are asked can subtly push people toward different answers. So, despite careful planning, these kinds of errors can quietly creep into polls, affecting their accuracy and leaving us with results that aren't always as precise as they seem. With all these potential pitfalls, can polls ever paint a truly reliable picture of public opinion? This is where poll aggregation steps in, a technique that combines results from multiple polls to create a more balanced, stable view. By averaging a variety of polls, aggregation helps to smooth out individual errors, like sampling bias or the influence of question wording. US-based poll aggregators like 538, Real Clear Politics, and The Economist model each combine polls, weighing them by sample size, methodology, and past accuracy, to produce an overall snapshot of public sentiment. This approach tends to be more accurate than any single poll alone, giving us a fuller, more dependable perspective on where voters stand. Yet even with aggregation, polls aren't foolproof, and real-world limitations can still cause them to miss the mark. For one, polls are just snapshots in time, capturing public opinion as it stands when the poll is conducted. And opinions can shift rapidly, especially in the days or even hours leading up to an election. Then there's the unpredictable factor of voter turnout. If certain groups, like younger or first-time voters, show up in unexpectedly high or low numbers, it can throw off predictions, especially if pollsters didn't account for these changes. So if polls aren't always accurate, why do we keep relying on them? While they have limitations, they remain valuable for showing trends over time, giving us insight into how opinions shift and evolve rather than delivering exact predictions. They're especially useful for tracking the general direction of public sentiment on key issues and candidates. But in close races, it's essential to remember that polls are approximations, not certainties. Instead of seeing them as guarantees, we should view polls as one tool among many to gauge public opinion, a helpful, if imperfect, snapshot of where people stand.